Coming up, as Liz Truss becomes the fourth Prime Minister to be eaten by Brexit, the state of British politics is being mocked by other countries all over the world. The currency, bond and stock markets are also in their own way mocking the competence of our Tory government. After 12 years of planning, the oligarch-funded media and Tufton Street think tanks managed to get their hand-reared, indoctrinated puppets installed in numbers 10 and 11 Downing Street. As soon as their ultra-libertarian economic dogma was tested in the real world, its failure was both immediate and catastrophic, damaging the global reputation of an isolated, economically underperforming post-Brexit Britain for many years to come. Stay tuned. If you enjoy watching my videos, please give this one a like and spread the word by sharing a link on your favoured social media platforms. If you subscribe, you can also hit the bell icon to be notified of each new video I release. Belgian politician Guy Verhofstadt was the European Parliament's representative on matters relating to the UK's withdrawal from the EU. He was dismayed by the British negotiating team's hard line on limiting the rights of EU citizens within the UK after Brexit and their disregard for the future rights of British citizens within the EU. A week ago, as Truss's premiership began circling the plug hole, he tweeted, "How's Brexit going? One thing is for sure, the mess didn't start in 2022, but in 2016. I couldn't agree more." And in a similar vein, identifying Brexit as the primary cause of Britain's demise, Luxembourg's Prime Minister, Xavier Bettel, started listing the UK leaders he's known since 2016. Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss, before adding, "The consequence of the Brexit brings instability in the UK now." Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez of Spain told the Spanish Parliament that the neoliberal path failed in the previous financial crisis, created a great deal of suffering, and will again lead to failure for those who follow it, as we have just seen in the UK. And American President Joe Biden called Britain's plan to scrap the 45% top income tax rate a mistake. Biden has often criticised conservative trickle-down economic policies that had previously been tried and failed in America under Reagan. He went on to say about the UK government's experiment, "I think that the idea of cutting taxes on the super wealthy at a time when... Anyway, I just think I disagreed with the policy." So some top trolling there from Spain and America, Belgium and Luxembourg. And perhaps not surprisingly, Russia weighed in as well, with Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova saying, "Britain has never known such a prime minister. The helmet on board the tank, the catastrophic illiteracy, and the Queen's funeral right after the audience with Truss will be what's remembered of her." Okay, however we may feel about Russia right now, that is some top-level trolling right there. The Colombian newspaper El Colombiano reported, "Liz Truss has managed to drag her party and her country into a debacle, the depth of which the country has never before sunk to, and less so at such speed. Clinging to her ideology, far removed from the reality facing the country, Truss exemplifies to perfection what it means to go against common sense when steering the politics of a country." In India, the Hindu newspaper wrote that Britain is gradually turning itself into a cautionary tale with regards to bad politics, and that Truss may have added the label of incompetence to the Tory governance image. The Sydney Morning Herald said that, in a certain sense, this Tory nightmare really began with a loss, specifically David Cameron's lost gamble that he could put Brexit to bed. Very interesting there from our Australian friends, who seem to be able to see clearly what's happening in Britain from a distance. Rebecca Armitage over on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation wrote, "Voters are the ones who have endured a devastating pandemic, Putin's cold and costly winter, and now a looming recession. After their government descended into chaos, infighting and betrayal, they want to say in what happens next." Excellent stuff from the other side of the globe. And from Canada, it was just as blunt, with Tom Ruckman, columnist at Canada's Globe and Mail, blaming Britain's political disgrace on The culmination of 6 woeful years sparked by the vote for Brexit, which hastened the decline of a major power while thrusting dunces and charlatans into command. Sadly, Britain cannot simply vote this mess off the island. Besides the ongoing costs of Brexit, this latest loss of credibility means billions more frittered on higher borrowing costs. Public service cuts, inflation and soaring energy prices make for a frightening winter. One economic boost is obvious, yet few dare speak its name: rejoining the EU. So all these detached, objective observers would disagree with those ever more desperate Brexitists leaving comments on this channel, insisting that the post-Brexit cluster has nothing to do with Brexit. But an objective observer from anywhere else in the world would see the clear consequences of that marginal vote to leave the European Union and the impact the result of the advisory referendum had in destabilising a country which was previously seen as one of the most stable in the world. Brexit, they would see, had shrunk the UK economy by 5.2% by the end of 2021, with a 13.7% fall in investment and a 13.6% drop in the trade in goods. We were the first nation in history to impose economic sanctions on itself. So it's absolutely no surprise that the UK felt international shocks like surging inflation and low economic growth far worse than all other comparable economies. And with a smaller economy, you either have to tax people more to pay for the services they expect, or you cut those services, or you borrow. Those are the only 3 options. And yet Kwarteng's so-called fiscal event seemed to suggest that we didn't have to do any of them due to some miracle of economic growth, which would be magicked up by tax cuts that would disproportionately favour the rich and kickstart the mythical trickle-down economy. The global financial markets blew a big fat raspberry at this Tufton Street dogma-based economic model. The very markets that the Truss, Kwarteng, Tufton Street ideology both worshipped and fetishised. It was like a bride being jilted at the altar by their lover. The Truss resignation, following so soon on the heels of the Johnson resignation, is sending a clear message to the rest of the world that Britain is in crisis. Our AAA credit rating has gradually sunk to AA- since the Brexit vote, while Fitch lowered the outlook for British government debt from stable to negative right after the mini-budget. This means the cost of government borrowing inevitably rises, and so the poor global reputation of post-Brexit Tory-governed Britain is in itself adding to the financial burden on the country. In 2016, Brexitist politicians defied empirical facts, elementary logic and expert forecasts, and pretended that the UK could weaken its trading ties to its nearest neighbours, yet somehow get richer because of the so-called Brexit opportunities, giving us the freedom to strike trade deals globally. Much like, as I've said in a previous video, giving Therese Coffey the freedom to date will.i.am. But it was Brexit that paved the way for this nonsense. Brexit allowed politicians to spout magical thinking of sunlit uplands and unicorns crapping out rainbows as if they were achievable goals. The way these Brexit fantasies were accepted by the Leave voters so readily, despite the hard evidence to the contrary, set the tone for the Tory government from 2016 onwards, and eventually gave us the magical thinking of Tufton Street Trussonomics, insisting that you could cut taxes for the richest, make absolutely no cuts to public services, and control borrowing all at the same time. And the narrative was that because of something called Brexit freedoms, or what I like to call the Therese Coffey will.i.am freedoms, we could implement these economic policies and the dastardly EU wouldn't be able to stop us. Sovereignty in it. Taking back control. Britain as the master of its destiny, unburdened by the need to consult the experts or worry about the rest of the world. Proud, powerful, independent, plucky Britain, all spitfires and bulldogs. Well, the so-called fiscal event saw that go up in a puff of smoke. It was a complete delusion in this modern, interconnected world. There's no longer any such thing as pure sovereignty. No nation can do what the hell it likes without repercussions and potential penalties from its neighbours, allies or adversaries. Market reactions can't be blamed on the EU. If anything, the markets have shown they have more control over the UK than Brussels ever did. I mean, the markets have got rid of both a Chancellor and a Prime Minister within days of their amateur hour attempt to exercise these fantasy Brexit freedoms. The Brexit fantasy has collided with reality, and reality has emerged the winner. The same reality that Remainers were mocked for warning about. Project Fear has become Project Reality. The Brexitists believed in British exceptionalism and couldn't accept the UK's place in the modern world. But the rest of the world knew and has been watching with either increasing concern or schadenfreude as post-Brexit Britain under the Tories has continued to act as if it could bend the rest of the world to its will. It can't, and that's what sorted Truss and her ultra-neoliberal economic experiment. I'm optimistic now that the Brexit bubble has finally burst. The country as a whole has seen through the fantasy of the Tory party as a credible and prudent steward of the economy. Multiple opinion polls confirms that this particular fiction has been completely swept away now. And as the electorate has now seen through one fantasy, is it too much to hope that they may now be better placed to see through the other big Tory fantasy that Brexit would ever be in the interest of anyone other than the oligarchs and the tax evaders domiciled offshore? Even the Telegraph newspaper, always one of the most pro-Brexit voices, carried an article by their assistant editor, Jeremy Warner, this week, saying Project Fear was right all along and that Brexit has led to a calamitous loss of standing. Former Tory Chancellor George Osborne chipped in, saying Britain's political class was living in unreality, failing to understand the scale of the economic decline since Brexit. Britain's economic performance since the Brexit referendum has been markedly worse than it was previously set to be. And Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary laid the blame for what he called the current economic car crash, and not, I noted, plane crash, squarely on Brexit, saying the mini-budget disaster stemmed from the whole concept of Brexit. And to sum it all up, Jonathan Freedland, writing in The Guardian this week, said, the Tory hallucination of an island able to command the tides was no more than a fever dream, and a dangerous one at that. We can pronounce Trussonomics dead. Bring on the day when we can say the same of the delusion that spawned it. And the delusion that spawned Truss and Trussonomics being, of course, Brexit.
Welcome to the Brexit, sir. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.